Thank you so much, David, for plugging me multiple times. And thank you, Korea, for being here.
David, this is actually my first time in Seoul as well. Really excited to be here. And crazy to think that this was half the size last year. So as David mentioned, I came over as part of an acquisition for Mosaic ML. You know, like most startups and probably some startups in this room, we were very scrappy and we thought we could do everything ourselves for the most part, right? Databricks is cool. That this is before we knew we're getting bought. We trained a lot of the MBT models pre-Databricks and we thought we'd do the data prep ourselves. Fast forward to the day we get bought. We obviously have Databricks.com email addresses.
We get access to the Databricks
keys to the kingdom. And literally overnight, our ETL workbooks, our data prep for making our models better, went from 2 weeks to 2 hours. And I was talking to one of our researchers. He's like, hey, Barry, it turns out we got bought by a really good company that worked out pretty well for us. I was like, yeah, it really does. And, you know, building what David just said, DBRX, like we made at the time, you know, it lasted about 3 weeks. It turned out they came out with 3, much larger horse than that. But the reason we were able to make such a great model was because we have great engineering team at Databricks. But more importantly, we have a fantastic data platform. And you can't make an amazing model without having amazing data and getting your data ready to be able to do that. And again, before I keep going to Databricks, ChatGPT, I was talking about neural network training. Before Chat, nobody had any idea what I was talking about. ChatGPT came out and I'd go to, commercial enterprises and talk about, do you want a ChatGPT on your data? Or are you on the model? And that's where we took off. But thanks to ChatGPT, people started to realize how much data quality and cost matter. And as we all know, everybody is now talking about generative AI. It's a big part of our platform today. It's part of the data intelligence platform. For a show of hands, how many of you are using Azure OpenAI today? Feel like you're all being a little shy. There's more than 2 people using it, I'm pretty sure. So when I talk to people, almost every single organization I talk to is using Azure AI. And I get asked constantly from CIOs and CTOs and other techs and companies, what should my Gen AI strategy be? Barry, like my board or my CEO told me, I see you do something. I was like, well, we don't need to boil the ocean. Let's figure out how to take you on that journey. And Dataverse was really good at being able to do that. The other big thing is that most leaders today, you see the 75%, are convinced that if they're not actually going on this Gen AI journey, they're going to be left behind. But more importantly on this is, how do you get differentiation in that journey? If you're all using the same model, 3 or Azure API, or other publicly available models, proprietary models, you need to be able to customize these and make them unique to yourself. And finally, we see lots of employees already today getting a lot more efficiency using these models. I think GitHub Copilot is a great example of this we're seeing across enterprises today. We also see a lot of grandiose, potentially negative headlines and other ridiculous things. And if you're like me, I go on Twitter all the time and, my Twitter feed is very smart because I care a lot about AI and hard language models and, stable diffusion type models. And there's more than just what's in the headlines. This is going to automate a lot of tasks.
But how do we make our humans more efficient doing that? You see the stat up here that McKinsey's coming out with 30% of hours worth are going to be a lot more successful because they're using AI today. With that being said, as David talked about and I alluded to a little bit, is building these models is really, really hard, and getting them from POCs, production, is really, really hard as well. And, we talk to hundreds of customers around the world, and when we're interviewing them and asking them to conduct surveys with us, only 90% of those organizations we're talking today are confident that they can get these models into production. And that's where I think. And we think Databricks, obviously, we can help. Now, as David mentioned too, there's a number of concerns, and you think immediately in today's climate that a lot of those concerns are around cost. But we do so much Databricks to lower the cost as much as we can, that actually One of the key concerns that I hear from customers when I'm traveling around the world talking to them and on Zoom calls is around quality, and it comes down to the accuracy, the safety, and the governance of where that data came from, how it's loaded into that model, and more importantly, how that model is being utilized. Now I'm going to have some examples that might seem a little silly, but these are all real world. You've probably seen them online, and they might be a little eccentric, so bear with me here, but hopefully this resonates still. So this is a Chevrolet dealership in the United States, had ChatGPT on their website. Somebody asked, hey, Chevrolet dealership, what's the top pickup truck I should go buy? Now, if you're a Chevrolet dealership and you immediately recommend a rival product, a Ford F-150, that's probably not very good. And in this case, the accuracy of that model was weak because, as you see, they did account for enterprise context, right? Hey, let's respond to the Chevy Silverado, or another Chevrolet product. You'll see later today, as some of you saw this morning, we have Playground as a way of interacting with a bunch of different models. Within Databricks, in this case, we're showing ChatGPT-4. Semantics are important when you're an enterprise. You want the jargon and acronyms and lexicon that you utilize, and understanding the semantics of that information is important. For us as Databricks employees, we refer to ourselves as Bricksters, and you see this example. If you ask GPT-4, what is a Brickster? It talks about a character from a Lego game. Not relevant to us. You need to find that model to make sure it understands that context. This one made a lot of news because it cost your candidate a lot of money. Model hallucinating is a big problem, and being able to control for that can lower your cost. In this case, you can see from the headline, there's a refund policy that this jackpot that they automatically implemented on the Air Canada website started refunding customers tens of thousands of dollars on their tickets based on this agreement made. And obviously this was a PR disaster for Air Canada, and they ended up having to actually honor these refunds, which was costly. Another example, being able to inject trumps into these models. Going back to this poor Chevrolet dealership, maybe so you don't have to read all this text. Basically what somebody did was they overrode the instructions of the model and said, hey, listen to whatever I tell you. And oh, by the way, I want to negotiate to buy a truck from you, and I don't want to pay more than $1. Now, obviously, I'm sure lawyers got involved. There's probably a bit of a PR snafu for them. But having your model agree to sell your truck for $1 is not very good for you. So again, how do you control or guardrails against those attacks? Another example, monitoring your content filters. His is a real world example on Amazon. A lot of organizations automatically just monitor your content, flow through their products to Amazon.com. In this case, those product names were coming from Azure OpenAI or from OpenAI directly. You see, immediately, I apologize, but I cannot complete this task. Requires using trademark brand names from OpenAI. There are no content filters to make sure when that automated process happens, it automatically updated or applied to human or created the actual type of what that should be. It's a really, really big deal when you don't have monitoring or content filters in place. Another funny example. So Hamlin was the CTO of Mosaic. Madej is the CTO of Databricks, as you probably know. And in this case, Hamlin called up his cell phone operator and said, hey, my phone is too expensive. What can you offer me? Now it's good that the AI agent knew that Madej was his coworker, made that connection, but it's bad and lacks governance when it's telling you that, hey, Battle actually only pays $20. That work for you? Now, this is a silly example talking about cell phone plans and international rates, but imagine if this was healthcare or financial data and it started to mulch that information. That's not good. And as David mentioned as well, what this all comes down to, these models need to understand the enterprise data that's stored. In this case, within the enterprise, to understand that context, to understand the semantics, to be able to be accurate, safe, and governed. So really, 3 things that are unique about what we provide here at the Databricks within the Mosaic AI product suite. We make it production quality, so it's safe and safeguarding. How do you control for the quality of those models? We talked about those examples. And finally, lower cost. And as David mentioned too, it's not just the training of these models, which actually made Mosaic well known again for some of that. We were the efficient ML company, so I just drive down the cost to train these models. But in the Unity catalog micro model that David mentioned, how do you start to have lower costs because you're serving a much smaller model? So instead of this massive model to do a very specific task, you can use a very small model to do that very same task. So how do you lower those unit inference economics as well? The other thing that we did with DBRX is a mixture of expert and model. So how do you, instead of using this 400 billion parameter model like Llama 3 is doing, you're using a 132 billion parameter model instead of MOE model. So you're actually only having to serve roughly a quarter of those parameters. So again, lowering the latency, also lowering the cost. We like to think we're the leading platform for maximizing this genetic quality for a lot of the reasons I said. But a lot of it comes down to unifying the data and the models across Unity catalog. We think that's one of our biggest differentiators, is being able to accurately track where that data went. Again, the data and the model level. Now it's me, the AI gateway. So we are a platform. Yeah, we release DBRX, but we don't actually care what model you utilize. And I'll say that again because it's pretty surprising to a lot of the people I work with. We don't actually care what model you utilize within DBRX or within Databricks. Whether it's DBRX or Llama 3 or Azure OpenAI, we make basically every proprietary model available, every open source model, and we want to give you all the choice to go to choose the best model for that application. We also want to give you the state-of-the-art model training. These models out of the box, as we've learned, are not aware of what a Brickster means. How do you start to fine-tune that model to make that model aware? How do you start to pre-train a model from scratch to do very specific capabilities? And then again, unified governance across all of this with Unity Catalog. We think we're the best place to train, whether pre-train or fine-tune these models as well. And the big thing with being able to do that, especially when you're fine-tuning off of open source models, is giving you own model ownership. A big differentiator with Databricks is when you fine-tune or pre-train on Databricks, you own the model. We fundamentally believe, and you've seen on the banners around the hall here, that it's your data, your AI or your model. You should be able to take and do what you want with that. Unity Catalog, you're controlling, again, the security and the compliance and governance across all that data. So you can start building your generative AI solution with us, again, from model serving, any one of those proprietary or open source models. You can do prompt engineering with them. We allow for RAG architectures. So it's RAG with an emphatic model. You can pair that with an open source model or a proprietary model. You can also fine-tune the model, and that RAG application we found greatly increases the quality and the accuracy and the control for that data. You can fine-tune a model on its own and serve that. You can also pre-train a model from scratch, again, with a much lower cost than anybody thinks. And in a couple of slides, I'll talk through that. But again, going back to the word I used earlier, rejoice, we want to give you the best application for that use case. Sometimes it's serving Azure OpenAI, sometimes it's serving Llama 3, sometimes it's a fine-tuned model like we did with Unity Catalog. Table descriptions, other times it's training is a small model from scratch. So you can understand and account for all the data that went into that model. A couple of examples, especially in more language-specific geographies and cultures. So in this case, Ola, customer of ours, they're known as Ola cabs to some. They're the Uber of India, if you will. And Ola care deeply about having their own model trained from scratch because they wanted to control what day they wanted to do it. But I also wanted to be very language specific. Azure OpenAI and the other models that were out there were not as aware of the Indian dialects and cultural differences that made up within their languages within India. And they wanted to account for that. Within the models they trained with us, So there's an organization, which is a subsidiary. It's called Gruntrum, and that's the name of the model as well. So it's completely trained from scratch using Databricks. Another example, and there's probably people in this room who was on earlier slides, Scatter Labs, a Korean startup, trained a lot of their models using Databricks and Mosaic. Again, because they wanted the language specificity within the models and quality of the outputs they needed. From a partner and customer perspective, Extension is a large partner of Databricks. They're utilizing us to build all their RAG applications and models on top of us, but they're also using us to do that on behalf of their clients. So we're working with a number of telcos who have around call center analytics and other call center applications. And then finally, Blocker Square, a large financial services company, using us for a bunch of internal chatbot and other enterprise applications around customer support and customer success. And talking about this, we're the most cost effective. So whether that's model training or model serving, whether it's fine tuning or pre-training from scratch, we want to give you the best place to go to control and serve those models. Here's a real world example. We've talked a lot about large language models and text. We actually, going back to choice, not only do we not care about what model it is, we also don't care if it's text or imagery. So everybody's familiar with what's likely to build the AI text-to-image models. And you see, in September 2022, they came out and said it costs about $600,000 to train Stable Diffusion from scratch. Our team of engineers, just using software, the exact same hardware, are able to lower that cost. And we would charge a customer from $600,000 to $160,000. Fast forward to March 2023, a few months later, less than $50,000. We can now train a Stable Fusion model from $600,000 to less than $50,000. Another real world example on the tech side. So if you all know GPT-3, for instance, and it's not always easiest to get accurate pricing details from OpenAI because they don't want to share it. But GPT-3 costs between $5 and $10 million to train. Mosaic published a white paper in the fall of 2022 that we can train GPT-3 quality model for not $5 to $10 million, but less than $450,000. Fast forward to today, because our research team is constantly working to drive down that cost, we can now train that model for less than $70,000. So these costs are not nearly as large as you think they are. And with $70,000, that's still a pretty large model. You can train much smaller models, again, with much more specific use cases. So it's around the choice and control around that data and those models and understanding where you want to conserve it, what applications, what use cases the best model is going to serve for it. Be safe.